Hello everyone, I'm Lauren and welcome to another video from the Tiny Menagerie. For the last year I have had just one lonely little cherry shrimp as my focus has really been on fish, but I've recently decided to get back into shrimp keeping and so I'm restarting the colony. Just to point out, if you are looking to keep just a couple of shrimp and you're not particularly interested in breeding them, then you can add them to an existing community tank, so long as it's a mature tank at least 4 months old with nice settled water parameters. And obviously no fish in there who will actively hunt your shrimp down. But if you're looking to breed your shrimp and produce offspring, or perhaps work with a certain line, maybe you're looking to make a profit from them, then you're really going to want to give them their own tank so that they and their offspring have the best possible chance of survival. And so, what do you need to set up a new colony of Neocaridina shrimp? Well, any shrimp keeper will tell you that by far the most important consideration for shrimp is the quality of your water. Luckily, Neocaridina are relatively hardy, at least compared to their extremely fussy Caridina cousins, although they're not so tolerant as the rather infallible Amano shrimp. A couple of chemicals you need to be particularly careful about are nitrites and ammonia, and you also need to be very careful about copper, which may have come from any new plants that you have that have been treated with insecticides. It is always absolutely imperative that you check the label says shrimp safe before you add any new plants to a shrimp tank. Luckily, all of these factors are a matter of time, and by thoroughly cycling your tank, that means having it set up and running for at least 4 months without adding anything new, then these chemicals should have been catalysed by the bacterial colonies that now inhabit the water. Basically, so long as the tank is mature and healthy, then it should be stable. And that's ultimately what kills most new shrimp when they're added into a new tank. It's not that the tank or the water is bad, it's just that the amount of chemicals in the water have fluctuated faster than the shrimp were able to adapt to. At best, this stresses them out, and at worst, it poisons them. It's a common symptom of newer tanks as they're going through the cycling phases, but it's much rarer in older ones, and so you really need to make sure you have a nice mature tank before you add any shrimp to it. Cherry shrimp are perfectly comfortable anywhere between 18 and 30 degrees. They are really tolerant of different temperatures, again, just so long as it doesn't change too quickly. And that's the same again for pH. They can go anywhere between 6.5 and 8. Just make sure it stays nice and stable. Another aspect you need to consider when you're starting a new colony is how much space can you give them. You should be looking to provide an absolute minimum of 25 litres. They can be kept in smaller nano tanks, but again, you've got that massive risk of spikes in water chemistry. It's not really worth it, and you might as well keep them in something bigger just for the peace of mind it's going to give you. Also, if you're starting a new colony with the idea of breeding, then you're going to need to have space for the numbers to grow, and you're probably going to want to have a cull tank set up as well. Now this isn't quite as gruesome as it sounds. It doesn't mean you're going to go in there and kill them all at some point. It just means it's a tank where you remove the unwanted shrimp too. Those who perhaps don't have the features that you're looking for that you want to breed, they're perhaps a little bit dull in their colours. Or just surplus to requirement. And this is particularly important if you're breeding for a very particular quality, because unfortunately it does tend to be the ugly shrimp, the ones who are reverting back to their wild brown colours, who are much stronger and they will pass on their genetics much more easily. And so if you don't remove these undesirables, you will find that the quality of your colony slowly diminishes. What you do with the unwanted shrimps is up to you, be it sell them, keep them, give them away. All that matters is that they are not in your breeding group. In terms of what you put in your shrimp tank, it's worth remembering that shrimp are very small, completely defenceless, and on the menu for the vast majority of aquatic creatures, and so they really do appreciate a tank that gives them plenty of hiding places. They feed on detritus and biofilm, which is essentially the slime that you feel whenever you take something out of the tank, and it's a build-up of bacteria and algae and phytoplankton, and it coats every solid surface in the tank. And so it makes sense that the more solid surfaces you have, the more biofilm can accumulate, the more food you can provide for the shrimp. And by far the easiest way I find to increase the number of surfaces is to have live plants. They fulfill everything a shrimp could possibly want, providing them with cover, with hiding places. Plants will even shed tiny little particles into the water that your shrimp can eat. And in my tanks, I like to just let the plants grow and do their thing. I know some people remove the yellowing, older leaves from them, especially if they're starting to look a bit unsightly, but I really like seeing them. I think they make a tank feel more natural when it's not all perfect and sparkling and green. I suppose I like a tank that looks a little bit wild, especially plants like Anubias, where their leaves take weeks to turn yellow and they break down very, very slowly. I think they add quite an interesting atmosphere to a tank. And of course, all the while that they're doing this, the shrimp are very happily eating them. When it comes to tank mates for your shrimp, sadly choices are exceedingly limited, and this is because while a tiny little fish like a nanofish wouldn't eat an adult shrimp, they will quite happily eat a defenseless little shrimplet. And so for shrimps, you're pretty much limited to keeping either other invertebrates, such as snails, amano shrimp, or filter-feeding shrimp like bamboo shrimp for example, or you can chance keeping them with algae-eating fish like Otocinclus or Placostomus, if your tank is large enough. My tank actually already has 2 Otocinclus in there. They were supposed to be temporary inhabitants way back when I first set this tank up, but without tearing it apart, I cannot catch these 2. They are incredibly good at hiding. And so I feed them algae tabs and that keeps them fat and they seem happy enough in there, so I just let them stay. Of course, one tank mate every shrimp needs is more shrimp. Neocaridina are very sociable in that they are much braver and more inclined to be out in the open when they can see that there's plenty of their own kind around. After all, if one shrimp can see that there's plenty of shrimp who aren't getting eaten, then it's probably safe to be out and about right now. As a minimum for a colony, I would say you'd need to start with 10. And that might sound like quite a lot, but it gives you a very good chance of having both males and females. Obviously without both, it's a pretty pointless venture to begin with. And also having that number just makes them feel less stressed and more comfortable in their new environment. And then if you're looking to buy 10 shrimp, then it makes sense that the next consideration is going to be a mixture of grading against cost. Most colours of Neocaridina shrimp have a grading system. Cherry shrimp, for example, have a low-grade shrimp who are well on their way to starting to resemble their wild ancestors. Then you've got mid-grade or Sakura shrimp, which have a redder body, but usually with some paler patches, all the way up to painted fire red, who are a nice solid red colour all over, including their little legs. There's also the Bloody Mary grade, but these differ from normal cherry shrimp in that they have red flesh and a see-through carapace, rather than clear flesh and a red carapace, which is what we see on normal cherries. But as you go up the grading system, obviously so does the cost of each individual shrimp, and they can get quite expensive at the higher grades. But the good news is, don't forget, if you start with the lower grade of shrimp, even the lowest grade of shrimp in fact, you can breed them up to the higher grades by selective breeding. In fact, I would argue that is half the fun of keeping shrimp in the first place. It's seeing your colony develop and grow in whichever direction you choose it to go, whether you want colours to be lighter or darker, or just for the fun of seeing how good you can get it. You don't have to buy that massively expensive grade. Buy a mid-range one and breed up to the expensive grade. That's certainly my plan. Either way though, shrimp keeping is a fascinating hobby and I'm really looking forward to working with my new colony. But I also really hope you've enjoyed this little video on starting a new cherry shrimp colony. Happy shrimp keeping everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!